There's a quiet kind of pain a grown woman carries when she realizes she spent years trying to be understood by someone who was comfortable misunderstanding her. Not because she had no voice, not because she had no wisdom, not because she did not know how to love, but because somewhere along the way, she began to believe that if she explained herself more gently, waited a little longer, gave a little deeper, softened a little more, then maybe the person in front of her would finally see what was sacred in her. And that is a grief many women do not speak about. The grief of realizing she was not asking for too much. She was asking the wrong person to honor something they had already decided to treat lightly. There comes a moment in a woman's life when she must sit with a truth that does not shout, but still changes everything. You are the only one who has to live your own life. Not the person who left you confused. Not the person who gave you pieces of affection and called it effort. Not the person who enjoyed your loyalty while offering no real safety. Not the person who watched you shrink, apologize, wait, and ache, and still did not rise to meet you with care. You are the one who has to wake up inside your own body. You are the one who has to carry the consequences of what you keep accepting. You are the one who has to live with the silence after you betray yourself just to keep somebody close. And because of that, your life cannot be built around someone else's uncertainty. For a long time, you may have called it patience. You may have told yourself you were being mature, understanding, faithful, compassionate, and perhaps you were. There is nothing small about a woman who can love with steadiness in a world that often teaches people to leave when things become inconvenient. But patience becomes dangerous when it asks you to disappear. There's a difference between giving love time to grow and giving someone permission to keep you emotionally hungry. There is a difference between grace and self-erasure. There is a difference between being understanding and becoming the place where another person's carelessness can rest without consequence. Many women do not lose themselves all at once. They lose themselves in small negotiations. One unanswered message she pretends did not hurt. One disrespectful tone she explains away. One lonely night she tells herself not to make a problem. One apology she gives just to bring peace back into the room. One need she hides because she is tired of being called too much. And little by little, she begins standing outside the door of her own life, waiting for another person to invite her back in. But beloved, this is your life, your breath, your years, your mornings, your body that carries stress when love becomes uncertainty, your nervous system that grows tired from waiting for warmth that arrives only when it is convenient, your heart that was never designed to survive on crumbs and call them a meal. A person's inability to choose you with clarity is not a verdict on your worth. It is information about their capacity. It may hurt. It may humble you. It may bring you to your knees in the private hours when the house is quiet and your mind starts replaying every conversation, every silence, every moment you wonder where you became less important. But their inconsistency does not name you. Their silence does not define you. Their betrayal does not reduce you. Their emotional limitations are not measurements of your value. A woman can be deeply worthy and still be mishandled. She can be loyal and still be abandoned. She can be beautiful in spirit and still be unseen by someone committed to looking only when it serves them. This is one of the hardest truths to accept, because rejection often makes a woman search herself for the flaw. She asks, Was I too emotional? Was I not enough? Did I ask for too much? Did I love too hard? But sometimes the wound is not that you were too much. Sometimes the wound is that you kept pouring into hands that never intended to hold what you gave. And now the work is not to become cold. Coldness is not healing. Bitterness is not dignity. Pretending you no longer care is not freedom. The work is to become honest. Honest enough to stop polishing a mirror for someone who keeps turning away. Honest enough to admit that love without respect becomes a place of slow injury. Honest enough to say, I can miss you and still no longer make a home inside your uncertainty. That is where self-respect begins. Not in a dramatic announcement, not in revenge, not in proving you are desirable to someone else, but in the private decision to stop negotiating against your own truth. The practical shift is gentle, but serious. Before you ask, why didn't they choose me? Begin asking, what did I begin accepting when I was afraid not to be chosen? That question does not shame you. It returns you to yourself. It helps you see the places where longing became louder than wisdom. It helps you recognize the difference between love and emotional starvation. It helps you understand that the ache to be chosen can become so strong that a woman may hand someone the pen and let them write the story of her value. But they were never qualified to write that story. Not the careless, not the inconsistent, not the emotionally absent, not the one who only came close enough to keep your hope alive, but never close enough to give your heart rest. Your life is not a waiting room for someone else's awakening. Your life is not a table you keep setting for someone who only arrives when hungry. Your life is not a place where your dignity must be lowered so another person can remain comfortable. You are the only one who has to live your own life. So you must become the guardian of it. Not harshly, not fearfully, but truthfully, because the years you spend doubting yourself do not come back untouched. The nights you spend begging for clarity leave marks. The seasons you spend confusing attachment with love can make you forget how peace feels. And yet, even now, your worth is not lost. It may be buried beneath disappointment. It may be tired. It may be quiet. It may be waiting for you to stop asking the wrong person to confirm something your soul has been trying to tell you all along. But it is still there. And in the next part, we will begin looking at the painful place where a woman stops measuring herself by who failed to value her and starts listening again to the truth she abandoned inside herself. One of the cruelest things emotional neglect can do to a woman is make her question the parts of herself that were actually healthy. Her need for consistency, her desire for tenderness, her longing for honest conversation, her wish to be considered, remembered, chosen with care. These were not weaknesses. These were signs that something alive inside her still believed love should feel like a place where her heart could breathe. But when she kept bringing those needs to someone who treated them like pressure, she slowly began to doubt the needs themselves. She wondered if she was asking too much. She wondered if peace meant staying silent. She wondered if love meant learning to survive with less. And that is where many women become strangers to themselves. Not because they lack wisdom, but because they spent too long inside a relationship where their emotional reality was always being questioned, minimized, delayed, or ignored. Silence can do that. Silence can make a woman search for meaning in emptiness. She reads the tone of a short message. She studies the hours between replies. She replays the last conversation looking for the sentence that changed everything. She lies awake at night, not only missing the person, but trying to understand why her presence became so easy to overlook. And after a while, silence begins to feel personal. It begins to whisper, maybe you are not important. But silence is not always truth. Sometimes silence is avoidance. Sometimes silence is immaturity. Sometimes silence is control. Sometimes silence is a person enjoying the comfort of your loyalty while refusing the responsibility of your heart. And a woman must be careful not to turn someone else's emotional absence into evidence against herself. That is the quiet work of healing. To stop using their lack of response as proof that you are lacking. To stop using their distance as proof that you are difficult to love. To stop believing that if you had been softer, prettier, calmer, less wounded, more patient, more impressive, then perhaps they would have chosen you properly. There's a deep grief in realizing you were trying to become easier for someone who was never planning to love you with depth. You trimmed your voice. You softened your disappointment. You made excuses for behavior that kept hurting you. You called it understanding because the truth felt too painful. But a woman cannot keep abandoning her truth and still expect to feel whole. Every time she says, it's fine, when it is not fine, something inside her learns not to trust her. Every time she apologizes just to restore peace, something inside her remembers the cost. Every time she ignores the ache in her chest, her body begins carrying what her mouth refuses to say. This is why betrayal recovery is not only about the person who hurt you, it is also about rebuilding trust with yourself. The self that knew something was wrong. The self that felt the distance. The self that noticed the inconsistency. The self that kept whispering, this does not feel safe, while your longing kept answering, maybe tomorrow will be different. You do not rebuild dignity by punishing yourself for hoping. Hope is not foolish. Hope is human. You hoped because you loved. You stayed because you saw potential. You gave because giving had become part of how you survived, how you proved, how you held things together when other people were careless with what mattered. But now tenderness must be joined with truth, because love that requires you to keep betraying your own knowing is not love. You can safely build a life around. Ask yourself gently, where did I begin calling my pain patience? Where did I confuse being needed with being valued? Where did I accept fragments because I was afraid that asking for wholeness would leave me with nothing? These questions are not meant to wound you. They are meant to wake you. There is a kind of awakening that does not look dramatic. It looks like a woman no longer explaining her tears to someone committed to misunderstanding them. It looks like her phone staying face down because she has finally stopped worshiping the sound of a notification. It looks like her breathing through the craving to reach out, not because she has stopped caring, but because she has started caring about herself too. That is not weakness. That is a woman returning to the center of her own life. A woman who has been emotionally starved may mistake crumbs for tenderness, a little attention, a late apology, a warm message after days of distance, a sudden softness that arrives just when she is almost strong enough to leave. And because her heart is hungry, she may call that small offering proof. But proof is not a moment. Proof is pattern. Proof is not how sweet someone becomes when they feel you pulling away. Proof is how consistently they honor you when they are not afraid of losing access to you. That is a painful but necessary distinction, because many women are not addicted to mistreatment. They are attached to the memory of tenderness. They are attached to the version of the person that appeared just often enough to keep hope breathing. They are attached to the dream of what love could become if only the other person would finally mature, finally see, finally choose, finally stay. But your life cannot be built on someone's almost honest, almost ready, almost present, almost loving, almost choosing you. Almost is still absence when your soul needs safety. And you are the only one who has to live inside the cost of that absence. This is where the inner shift begins. Stop asking, do they still care? Start asking, does their care create peace, clarity, and respect in my life? Because someone can care in a limited way and still not love you in a way that is safe for your heart. Someone can miss you and still not be able to meet you. Someone can want access to you and still not be willing to honor you. Someone can feel something for you and still leave you carrying everything alone. The truth does not have to erase the love you felt. It only has to protect you from using that love as a reason to keep bleeding. A memorable line to carry with you is this: do not let the person who made you question your worth become the person you keep asking to restore it. They may never explain. They may never apologize in the language your heart needed. They may never admit how deeply their silence changed you. But your healing cannot remain locked behind their accountability. Your dignity begins to rise when you stop waiting for someone else's honesty before you become honest with yourself. And in the next part, we will move closer to the place where a woman stops begging reality to be different and begins letting truth become the ground beneath her feet. There is a moment when a woman grows tired of arguing with reality, not because she has stopped feeling, not because her heart suddenly obeys her wisdom, not because the memories no longer visit her in the quiet, but because somewhere deep inside, she begins to understand that truth is not cruel just because it hurts. Sometimes truth is the hand that finally pulls her out of the place where longing kept her kneeling. For a long time, she may have lived between what happened and what she hoped it meant. He disappeared, but maybe he was overwhelmed. He betrayed her trust, but maybe he was confused. He gave fragments, but maybe he loved her in the only way he knew how. He did not choose her fully, but maybe one day he would wake up and realize what she had been all along. And hope, when mixed with pain, can become a very persuasive thing. It can make a woman stay at a table where she is no longer being fed. It can make her keep watering a garden where nothing was planted for her. It can make her confuse the ache of attachment with the presence of love. But reality, when she is brave enough to face it, begins to speak clearly, not with hatred, not with drama, not with punishment, just with facts. The calls did not come. The care was inconsistent. The respect was conditional. The peace was rare. The clarity had to be begged for. The commitment never became solid enough for her to rest. And one painful but freeing truth is this: a woman does not have to hate someone in order to admit they were hurting her. She does not have to erase the good moments to recognize the pattern. She does not have to call it all a mistake to understand that it cost her too much. This is where dignity begins to return. Not in pretending she never loved, but in refusing to let love become an excuse for staying where her spirit is being worn down. Many women feel shame when they finally see how much they tolerated. They remember the messages they sent, the explanations they gave, the nights they waited, the ways they made themselves smaller, easier, quieter. They grieve not only the person, but the version of themselves who kept trying to earn what should have been offered freely. And that grief can feel heavy. It can make her whisper, "How did I let myself accept so little?" But shame is not the voice that will lead her home. Truth will. Compassion will. Accountability without cruelty will. Because the woman who stayed was not stupid. She was attached. She was hopeful. She was tired. She was trying to make love work with the tools she had at the time. She may have been carrying old wounds that taught her to work harder when affection became uncertain. She may have learned long ago that being useful was safer than being honest. She may have confused being needed with being cherished because someone once made her feel that love had to be earned through endurance. So no, she does not need to insult herself for surviving in the way she knew, but she does need to tell herself the truth now. And the truth is this: your life cannot become healthy while you keep defending what keeps breaking you. That does not mean you must become hard. It means you must become clear. Clear enough to see that being chosen inconsistently is still a form of emotional poverty. Clear enough to stop calling confusion chemistry. Clear enough to stop naming anxiety as passion. Clear enough to stop mistaking someone's return for restoration. Because sometimes they return without repentance. Sometimes they miss your comfort, not your soul. Sometimes they want the door open, but not the responsibility that comes with entering your life with honor. And a grown woman must learn to ask a deeper question than, are they coming back? She must ask, what version of me would I have to become to let them back in unchanged? That question carries power, because the answer may reveal the cost. Would you have to silence your needs again? Would you have to pretend the betrayal did not alter something in you? Would you have to accept less honesty than your spirit requires? Would you have to live alert, scanning moods, measuring distance, waiting for the next withdrawal? If having them means losing yourself again, then the price is too high. There is no love worth becoming a stranger to your own peace. The practical inner shift is this: let reality be enough. Not the fantasy, not the potential, not the apology you imagined, not the version of them that appeared only when they feared losing you. Let what consistently happened become enough information for your next decision. This is not bitterness. This is maturity. This is a woman picking up her crown from the hands of someone who never knew how to hold it. This is her saying quietly, I will no longer make my life smaller to fit inside your uncertainty. Because you are the only one who has to live your own life. You are the one who must carry the emotional weight of every exception you make against your own knowing. You are the one who must rebuild after every time you abandon yourself for another chance. You are the one who must look in the mirror and recognize the woman looking back. So let her be someone you protect. Let her be someone you tell the truth to. Let her be someone you no longer leave waiting outside the door of her own life. This does not mean the pain disappears. There may still be days when you miss them, days when your body remembers their warmth before your mind remembers the wound. Days when you wonder if they ever truly understood what they lost. Let those days come without letting them leave. Missing someone is not a command. Longing is not a contract. Memory is not a reason to return to a place where your dignity had to beg for room. A memorable line to carry with you is this: the heart may still ache for what was familiar, but the soul knows when familiar has become unsafe. And as that truth settles, something inside you begins to change. Not loudly, not perfectly, but steadily. You stop asking pain to prove that love was real. You stop asking silence to explain your worth. You stop waiting for the person who wounded you to become the one who frees you. And in the next part, we will walk into the tender work of rebuilding self-trust, the sacred place where a woman learns to believe herself again. Rebuilding self-trust is one of the most tender forms of healing, because after betrayal, silence, inconsistency, or emotional neglect, a woman often does not only question the person who hurt her, she questions herself. She wonders why she did not leave sooner, why she ignored the first signs, why she kept explaining what should have been understood, why she stayed quiet when something inside her was already trembling, why she mistook anxiety for devotion, why she called distance a rough season when deep down she knew she was being slowly abandoned. And that kind of questioning can become cruel if she is not careful. It can turn healing into another place where she punishes herself. But the purpose of reflection is not to humiliate the woman you were. It is to understand her, to sit beside her with honesty and say, I see why you stayed. I see what you hoped for. I see how tired you were. And now I will not leave you there. That is self-trust beginning again. Not as a loud declaration, not as sudden confidence, but as a quiet promise that you will stop making your inner voice beg for your attention, because many times your body knew before your mind was ready. Your chest tightened. Your sleep changed. Your joy became harder to reach. You felt yourself waiting, watching, measuring, trying to predict whether love would feel warm today or distant again. That was not you being dramatic. That was your nervous system living without emotional safety. A woman cannot keep living in uncertainty and expect her spirit to remain untouched. When affection is inconsistent, the heart begins working overtime. It starts searching for patterns. It starts becoming grateful for crumbs. It starts making excuses before the other person even has to offer one. It starts trying to manage pain instead of naming it. And after a while, she may begin to feel ashamed of needing anything at all. But needing clarity does not make you needy. Needing respect does not make you difficult. Needing consistency does not make you demanding. These are not extravagant requests. They are the basic conditions where love can become a place of peace instead of a place of survival. The deeper wound is not only that someone failed to give you those things. The deeper wound is that you began wondering if you had the right to ask for them. That is where your dignity must be restored. You restore it by no longer treating your needs like crimes. You restore it by listening when something inside you says, "This does not feel loving." You restore it by refusing to make your peace dependent on someone else's mood, attention, apology, or return. One practical inner shift is to begin asking yourself before you respond, before you explain, before you reach out again. Am I acting from self-respect, or am I acting from fear of losing access? That question can save a woman from many old patterns, because fear will tell you to send the message. Fear will tell you to soften the truth. Fear will tell you to accept the excuse. Fear will tell you that a little attention is better than none. Fear will tell you that if you hold a boundary, you may lose them forever. But self-respect will ask something deeper. What do I lose if I keep abandoning myself? That is the question that brings a woman back to the center of her life. Because sometimes the greatest loss is not the person who walked away. Sometimes the greatest loss is the woman you became while trying not to lose them. The woman who stopped laughing freely. The woman who checked her phone before checking her own heart. The woman who made herself available to someone who made commitment feel like a burden. The woman who learned to survive on emotional leftovers and still called herself grateful. She deserves your tenderness, but she also deserves your protection. Do not mock her for wanting to be loved. Do not shame her for hoping someone would finally see her. Do not hate her for staying longer than she should have. Take her hand, tell her the truth, and lead her out. Self-trust is rebuilt through small, honest acts. You say no when your body feels no. You stop explaining to people who are committed to hearing only what benefits them. You pause before returning to what wounded you. You allow silence to be information. You let consistency matter more than chemistry. You let peace become more attractive than intensity. You let a person's pattern speak louder than their promise. This is not easy work. Sometimes it will feel like grief, because boundaries often require you to disappoint the part of you that still wants the story to end differently. There may be moments when your hand reaches for the phone almost automatically. Moments when you want to ask one more question, make one more point, offer one more chance, open one more door. And in that moment, you do not have to attack yourself. You simply pause. You breathe. You remember, longing is not always wisdom. You remember, access to you is not proof of love. You remember, your life is not a place where someone can come and go while you keep paying the emotional cost. A memorable line for this part of the journey is this: the woman you are becoming cannot be built from the same choices that kept breaking the woman you were. Let that truth be gentle but firm, because healing is not only about leaving what hurt you. It is about becoming someone you can trust with your own heart. Someone who does not ignore herself to keep peace. Someone who does not trade dignity for closeness. Someone who knows that love should not require the constant abandonment of her inner truth. And as self-trust begins to return, even softly, a woman starts to see her life differently. She begins to understand that she is not waiting to be rescued by someone's remorse. She is being restored by her own honesty. And in the next part, We will step into the quiet power of boundaries, not as walls built from bitterness, but as sacred lines that teach a woman how to protect what she has finally remembered is valuable. A boundary is not a punishment. It is not a door slammed in anger. It is not a performance of strength meant to make someone regret what they lost. A boundary is a quiet line drawn around the life you are responsible for living. It says, "This is where my peace begins to matter." It says, "This is where my dignity stops being negotiable." It says, "This is where I stop offering unlimited access to someone who has not shown consistent care." For many women, boundaries feel painful at first because they were taught to prove love through endurance. They learned to stay calm when they were hurting, to explain instead of leave, to understand instead of require, to forgive quickly so the relationship would not fall apart, to become smaller so someone else would not feel confronted by her needs. And when a woman has spent years being rewarded for overgiving, self-protection can feel almost selfish. But it is not selfish to stop bleeding for a person who keeps reopening the wound. It is not cruel to remove yourself from confusion. It is not cold to admit that someone's access to your tenderness must now be guided by truth. A woman can have a soft heart and still have firm standards. She can forgive and still not return. She can wish someone well and still stop letting them disturb her peace. She can understand why someone hurt her and still refuse to keep standing where they can do it again. This is mature dignity, not bitterness, not revenge, not pride. Dignity is the moment a woman stops trying to convince someone to value what they have already shown they are willing to risk losing. One of the reasons boundaries feel so hard is because they reveal reality. When you stop reaching out first, you may discover who was relying on your effort to keep the connection alive. When you stop explaining your pain, you may discover who only wanted your silence. When you stop accepting fragments, you may discover who was comfortable giving you less because you kept making less look acceptable. That discovery can hurt. It can feel like abandonment all over again. But sometimes what feels like loss is actually clarity arriving without decoration. The boundary did not create the distance. It revealed the distance that was already there. The boundary did not destroy the connection. It revealed how little the connection could survive without your overwork. And this is a holy kind of information. Painful, yes, but honest. Because a woman cannot build a peaceful life on illusions that require her to keep betraying herself. If someone only loves you when you ask for nothing, that is not emotional safety. If someone only shows effort when you are leaving, that is not consistency. If someone only becomes tender after hurting you, that is not restoration. If someone needs your silence in order to stay comfortable, that is not love. Love does not ask a woman to keep swallowing her truth so another person can avoid accountability. Love does not make her feel guilty for needing respect. Love does not train her body to brace for absence. Love does not leave her lying awake, searching for proof that she matters. And if what you are calling love keeps making you feel invisible, anxious, and ashamed of your own needs, then the question is no longer, how do I make them understand? The question becomes, why am I still trying to earn peace from the place that keeps taking it? That question may hurt, but it can also open the door. A practical shift begins when you stop making boundaries about the other person's reaction and start making them about your responsibility to your own life. You do not set a boundary because they will understand. They may not You do not set a boundary because they will suddenly respect you. They might resist it. You do not set a boundary because it guarantees they will change. It may only reveal that they will not. You set a boundary because you have finally accepted that your peace cannot depend on someone else's willingness to become fair. A boundary may sound like, I will not continue conversations where my feelings are mocked. It may sound like I will not keep giving emotional access to someone who disappears when honesty is required. It may sound like I can care about you, but I will not keep abandoning myself to stay connected to you. It may sound like silence after years of explaining. It may sound like no reply. It may sound like choosing rest instead of reopening a wound. It may sound like letting the phone remain untouched while your heart trembles and your dignity slowly stands up. That is not weakness. That is restoration in motion. Of course, there will be grief. Boundaries do not erase longing. They do not make the memories vanish. They do not turn the heart into stone. Sometimes a boundary will make you cry because it forces you to accept that love alone was not enough to make the relationship safe. Sometimes you will miss the person you are protecting yourself from. Sometimes you will wonder whether you are being too hard, too guarded, too final. But remember this, a boundary is not proof that you stopped loving. Sometimes it is proof that you finally stopped leaving yourself. That is the line worth carrying, because you are the only one who has to live the life your choices create. You are the one who must live inside the anxiety after you ignore your own knowing. You are the one who must repair the self-trust after you betray your truth. You are the one who must carry the private ache of saying yes when everything inside you was whispering no. So let your boundaries become a form of mercy toward yourself. Let them protect the woman who has already endured enough confusion. Let them honor the woman who no longer wants to confuse chaos with passion. Let them speak for the part of you that is tired of begging to be treated with basic care. You do not need to become untouchable. You need to become discerning. You do not need to close your heart. You need to stop handing it to people who only know how to hold it carelessly. Your softness is still beautiful, but now it must have a gate. Your love is still generous, but now it must have wisdom. Your heart is still capable, but now it must be protected by the truth you can no longer afford to ignore. And in the next part, we will move into the tender grief of releasing the fantasy, the painful but freeing moment when a woman stops loving potential more than she honors reality. Releasing the fantasy is one of the most painful forms of honesty, because the fantasy did not begin as foolishness. It began as hope. It began with the part of you that could see goodness, possibility, softness, and promise where other people may have seen only inconsistency. It began with the woman in you who believed love could grow if it was given enough patience, enough grace, enough time, enough room to become what it had not yet become. And there is something beautiful about that part of you. Do not despise her. She was not stupid for believing. She was not weak for hoping. She was not childish for imagining a future where the person she loved finally became steady, honest, present, and kind in the ways her heart needed. But there comes a time when a woman must stop building a life around what someone could become and begin honoring what their choices have already shown. Potential can be a dangerous place to live. It gives just enough light to keep you waiting, but not enough warmth to help you grow. It shows you the person they might be someday, while asking you to keep paying the price of who they are right now. And many women have spent years loving potential, not the daily reality, not the pattern, not the consistency, not the emotional safety, but the glimpses, the rare tenderness, the beautiful apology, the softened voice after distance, the memory of who they were in the beginning, the version of them that appeared just often enough to make leaving feel like betrayal. That is why release can feel so complicated. You are not only letting go of a person, you are letting go of the story you told yourself so you could survive loving them. You are letting go of the imagined ending, the conversation where they finally understood, the apology that covered every wound, the day they returned with clarity, maturity, and a heart ready to choose you without hesitation. And yes, there is grief in that, a deep grief, because sometimes the hardest goodbye is not to what happened. It is to what you kept praying would happen. But your life cannot remain suspended between someone's possibility and your own suffering. You are the only one who has to live inside the waiting. You are the one who feels the ache when they disappear. You are the one who carries the anxiety after another unclear conversation. You are the one who must rebuild after each disappointment while still pretending to be strong enough for ordinary life. So ask yourself with tenderness, am I loving who they are, or am I loving who I keep hoping they will become? That question can break the spell, not because it removes love, but because it brings love back into the presence of truth. And truth says, someone can have wounds and still be responsible for how they treat you. Someone can have potential and still be unsafe for your heart. Someone can care about you in some way and still not be able to honor your life with consistency. Someone can be good in moments and still not be good for your peace. This is not judgment. This is discernment. Discernment is what happens when a woman stops letting compassion blind her to consequence. Because compassion without boundaries can turn into a cage. You keep understanding them. You keep explaining them. You keep making room for their pain, their fear, their past, their confusion. And somewhere in all that room you make for them, you leave no room for yourself. No room for your exhaustion. No room for your disappointment. No room for the quiet anger of being treated as optional by someone you treated as important. No room for the woman who is tired of being noble while she is being neglected. It is possible to understand someone and still admit they are hurting you. It is possible to see their humanity and still remove yourself from their carelessness. It is possible to forgive what happened and still decide that your life needs distance in order to heal. Forgiveness does not always mean access. Grace does not always mean return. Love does not always mean staying available. Sometimes love must become release, not because the heart has no feeling left, but because the soul has finally grown tired of being ignored. A practical inner shift is this: stop measuring love by intensity and start measuring it by safety. Intensity can make you feel alive for a moment. Safety helps you live. Intensity can pull you back into the storm. Safety lets your nervous system rest. Intensity can feel like destiny when you are emotionally starving. Safety feels quiet at first, especially when chaos has trained your heart to confuse peace with emptiness. But peace is not emptiness. Peace is the sound of your life no longer being governed by someone else's inconsistency. Peace is waking up without needing to decode another person's silence. Peace is no longer begging for tenderness from a place that keeps making you feel small. Peace is the beginning of hearing yourself again. The memorable line is this: do not make a home inside someone's potential while your own life is waiting outside in the cold. Because your life needs you now, not the version of you who keeps waiting for proof, not the version of you who keeps negotiating with old pain, not the version of you who believes she must be chosen by them before she can return to herself. Your life needs the woman who can cry and still tell the truth, the woman who can miss someone and still refuse to abandon herself, the woman who can bless what was good, grieve what was painful, and walk away from what is no longer honest. This is not the end of love in you. It is the beginning of a wiser love, a love that no longer asks you to disappear, a love that no longer confuses suffering with depth, a love that no longer gives sacred access to people who only value what they can consume. And in the next part, we will step into the quiet restoration of identity, the place where a woman begins remembering who she was before she started shaping herself around someone else's absence. There is a particular sadness in realizing you shaped yourself around someone else's absence. You became quieter where you used to be open, more careful where you used to be free, more watchful where you used to be trusting. You learn to read moods, measure distance, soften needs, and prepare your heart for disappointment before disappointment even arrived. And after a while, you may have forgotten that you were not always this guarded. You were not always this tired. You were not always a woman who questioned whether her love made her too much. There was a self before the silence, before the betrayal, before the inconsistency trained your nervous system to expect uncertainty, before you started making excuses for someone who kept taking comfort from your presence while giving so little safety in return. And healing, in part, is the slow work of remembering her, not becoming who you were in the past exactly. Life has touched you too deeply for that. Pain has taught you things you cannot unknow. But there's a difference between being changed by experience and being defined by injury. You may not return to the woman you were before the wound, but you can return to the truth that existed before the wound convinced you otherwise. The truth that you are not difficult to love because someone loved you carelessly. The truth that your needs are not burdens because someone treated them as inconvenience. The truth that your softness is not foolish because someone consumed it without reverence. The truth that your life still belongs to you. This is where identity begins to come back. Not all at once, but in small, sacred moments. When you hear yourself laugh and realize it has been a long time. When you choose not to explain yourself to someone who never listened with care. When you make a decision without asking whether it will make you more acceptable to someone else. When you stop dressing your truth in softer clothing just to avoid another person's discomfort. When you remember that your peace is not a luxury, it is part of your survival. Many women do not realize how much of themselves they placed on hold while waiting to be chosen. Their joy, their confidence, their friendships, their creativity, their body, their rest, their future. They keep standing at the edge of someone else's uncertainty, hoping for an invitation into a life that never made room for them fully. But you are the only one who has to live your own life. And there comes a day when waiting becomes more painful than walking away. Not because walking away does not hurt. It does. Sometimes it aches in places you thought were already healed. Sometimes it feels like tearing your heart away from a dream that had become familiar. But staying where you are not honored has its own kind of violence. A quiet violence. The kind that slowly teaches a woman to expect less from love and less from herself. And that is not the life you were meant to live. You were not meant to spend your years proving that you are worth consistency. You were not meant to become fluent in someone else's excuses. You were not meant to keep lowering your voice so another person could avoid hearing the truth. You were not meant to abandon your own becoming, to remain available to someone who could not meet you with maturity. A practical inner shift begins when you ask, what part of myself have I neglected while trying to keep this connection alive? That question is not small. It may lead you back to your body, to rest, to prayer, to friendships you stopped nurturing, to dreams you postponed, to boundaries you delayed, to the quiet desires you dismissed, because all your emotional energy was being spent trying to understand someone else. And slowly, you begin gathering yourself, not as a performance, not to prove that you are healed, not to make anyone regret losing you, but because your life needs your presence again. You begin returning to your own mornings, your own rhythm, your own voice, your own decisions, your own future. You stop making someone else's attention the weather of your soul. That is a powerful kind of freedom. Because when a woman has been emotionally neglected, she can begin to live as though she only exists when someone responds to her. A message makes her feel alive. Silence makes her disappear. A small tenderness gives her hope. Distance makes her question her worth. But your existence is not dependent on being noticed by the one who failed to honor you. You are still here when they are silent. You are still valuable when they are absent. You are still whole even while you are healing. You are still becoming, even if they never turn back to witness it. The memorable line is this: you do not have to be seen by the person who overlooked you in order to return to the woman you are. Let that settle gently, because so much of healing is learning to stop performing your pain for someone who refused to understand it. You do not need them to finally see the depth of what they damaged before you begin repairing your life. You do not need them to admit your worth before you honor it. You do not need them to regret their absence before you stop living around it. Your restoration does not require their permission. And as you gather yourself, be patient with the woman who is learning how to stand again. Some days she will feel strong. Some days she will feel tender and unsure. Some days she will miss what hurt her, not because she wants to suffer, but because the heart takes time to release what it once called home. Let those days be part of the journey. Do not use them as proof that you are failing. Healing is not the absence of longing. Healing is when longing no longer has the authority to lead you back into self-abandonment. And now, With every honest choice, you begin to come home, back to your own life, back to your own dignity, back to the woman who can love deeply without disappearing. And in the next part, we will move toward the quiet strength of emotional independence, the moment a woman learns that being chosen by herself is not loneliness, but liberation. Emotional independence does not mean a woman no longer wants love. It does not mean she has trained her heart to need no one. It does not mean she has become so guarded that tenderness can no longer reach her. It means she has stopped making another person's choice the center of her own existence. And for a woman who has spent years measuring her peace by someone else's presence, that kind of freedom can feel strange at first, almost unfamiliar, almost too quiet. Because when you have lived through inconsistency, your body may become used to emotional noise. The waiting, the wondering, the checking, the hoping, the sudden relief when they come close again, the sharp ache when they disappear. That cycle can begin to feel like love when really it is your nervous system trying to survive uncertainty. And when the cycle finally begins to break, peace may not feel peaceful right away. It may feel empty. It may feel boring. It may feel like loss. But sometimes what feels empty is simply the absence of anxiety. Sometimes what feels quiet is your soul no longer being dragged through another person's confusion. Sometimes what feels lonely is actually the first room in your life where you can finally hear yourself again. There is a quiet, emotional truth here. A woman may miss the person who hurt her and still be healing from the version of herself who stayed too long. Those two things can exist together. You can miss their voice and still know their presence cost you too much. You can remember the good and still refuse to return to the pattern. You can feel tenderness for what was real and still admit that what was real was not enough to make it safe. That is maturity, not denial, not coldness. Maturity is when a woman stops needing her pain to be simple before she honors it. Because love is rarely simple. You may have loved someone who wounded you. You may have been loyal to someone who made you feel invisible. You may have defended someone who kept proving they were not protecting your heart. And accepting that complexity is part of growing into emotional independence. You no longer need to turn them into a monster in order to leave. You no longer need to erase the tender memories in order to trust your decision. You no longer need the whole story to be ugly before you admit it was not good for you. Sometimes the truth is quieter than that. Sometimes the truth is simply, I could not keep becoming smaller in order to remain close. That truth is enough. Emotional independence begins when you stop asking someone else to give you permission to trust what you already know. You stop waiting for them to agree that they hurt you. You stop waiting for them to understand the depth of your disappointment. You stop waiting for one final conversation to make your feelings legitimate. You stop handing your healing to the same hands that mishandled your heart. This does not mean closure is not desired. Of course, a woman wants clarity. Of course, she wants honesty. Of course, she wants someone to say with real humility, I see what I did. I see how I hurt you. I see what my silence cost you. But sometimes that apology never comes. Sometimes accountability arrives too small, too late, or not at all. And if your healing depends entirely on their honesty, then their avoidance remains in control of your life. That is too much power to give someone who already showed they could not carry your heart with care. So the practical inner shift is this. Begin building a life that does not require their participation for you to feel real. Eat because your body deserves care. Rest because your nervous system has been tired for too long. Dress in a way that reminds you your presence still matters. Return to the friendships, dreams, prayers, walks, books, music, and quiet rituals that make you feel like a woman with a life of her own. Do not do these things to prove you are fine. Do them because you are alive. Do them because your life has been waiting for you to stop standing at the edge of someone else's uncertainty. Do them because you are the only one who has to live your own life. And your life deserves more than being organized around someone who could not decide how to value you. There will be moments when emotional independence feels like grief. You may wish they would notice your absence. You may wonder if they are thinking of you. You may feel tempted to send one message, not because it will change anything, but because the silence feels heavy. In those moments, be gentle with yourself. Do not confuse the urge to reach out with proof that you should. Sometimes the hand reaches for what is familiar before the soul remembers what is safe. Pause there. Breathe there. Let the ache pass through you without letting it lead you back. You are not being cruel by staying away from what made you lose yourself. You are being faithful to the woman who had to survive the cost of staying. The memorable line is this. Loneliness may visit when you stop abandoning yourself, but it will not destroy you the way self-betrayal did. Let that truth hold you. Because many women fear being alone more than they fear being diminished. They fear the empty side of the bed, the quiet phone, the weekends without plans, the absence of someone to think about, worry about, wait for. But aloneness with dignity is not the same as loneliness inside a relationship. There is a kind of loneliness that happens when someone is physically close but emotionally absent. A loneliness where you lie beside someone and still feel unseen. A loneliness where you are connected in name but starving in spirit. A loneliness where you keep explaining your heart to someone who benefits from not understanding it. That kind of loneliness is heavier than solitude. Solitude can become healing. Solitude can become prayer. Solitude can become a mirror that finally reflects you back to yourself. Solitude can become the place where you remember that your worth does not rise and fall with someone else's attention. And slowly, emotional independence becomes less frightening. You begin to feel the difference between being unwanted and being unpossessed, between being alone and being free, between losing someone and returning to yourself. You begin to understand that being chosen by yourself is not a consolation prize. It is a restoration of authority. It is a woman taking back the pen. It is a woman deciding that no one else will write the ending of her life from a place of carelessness. And as this strength grows, your heart does not become smaller. It becomes wiser. It learns that love is welcome, but not at the cost of dignity. It learns that connection is beautiful, but not when it requires self-abandonment. It learns that softness can stay, but now it must walk beside standards. And in the next part, we will move into the deeper restoration of feminine dignity, the place where a woman no longer performs strength, but quietly becomes rooted in it. There is a kind of strength a woman learns before she ever wanted to be strong. the strength of getting up after a night of crying quietly, the strength of smiling in rooms where no one knows how tired her soul has been, the strength of doing what must be done while carrying questions no one answered, the strength of continuing life with a heart that still aches in private. But there comes a time when a woman must ask herself whether she is truly strong or whether she has only become skilled at enduring pain without making a sound. Because endurance is not always dignity. Sometimes endurance is survival. Sometimes it is conditioning. Sometimes it is the old habit of proving she can take more than she should have ever been asked to carry. Many women have been praised for being strong while quietly being unsupported. Praised for being patient while their needs were ignored. Praised for being forgiving while their wounds were never honored. Praised for being loyal while someone else enjoyed the safety of her devotion without offering safety in return. And over time, she may begin to mistake suffering silently for grace. But grace does not require self-abandonment. Dignity does not require pretending that pain did not happen. A mature woman does not have to become hard to become powerful. She does not have to make her face unreadable. She does not have to bury her tenderness. She does not have to act untouched by what broke her heart. Real dignity is quieter than performance. It is the moment she stops explaining her value to people committed to benefiting from her doubt. It is the moment she no longer offers her deepest truth to those who only know how to use it against her. It is the moment she can say, "This hurt me," without needing the person who hurt her to agree before she believes herself. That is a sacred kind of strength. Not loud, not bitter, not dramatic. Rooted. A woman rooted in dignity does not beg indifference to become love. She does not keep knocking on a door that only opens when the person behind it feels lonely. She does not confuse being missed with being honored. She does not mistake someone's regret for transformation. She has learned that some people are sorry only when access is removed. Some people become tender only when consequences arrive. Some people want the comfort of her presence, but not the responsibility of protecting her heart. And she no longer uses her compassion to excuse what keeps harming her. This is not a loss of softness. It is the protection of softness, because a woman's tenderness is not public property. Her patience is not an endless well. Her forgiveness is not a bridge people may keep burning and rebuilding at her expense. Her love is not a table where someone can come only when hungry and leave her with the dishes, the silence, and the ache. Dignity says, "I can understand you and still not allow you to keep hurting me." That sentence may change a woman's life, because many women think understanding must lead to staying. But understanding is not the same as permission. You can understand someone's wounds and still refuse to become the place where they act them out. You can understand their fear and still refuse to live under it. You can understand their confusion and still choose clarity for yourself. You can understand their past and still protect your future. The practical inner shift is this. Stop asking whether your boundary seems kind to them and begin asking whether your silence has been kind to you. That question is not cruel. It is necessary. Because sometimes what you have called kindness was really fear wearing gentle clothing. Fear of being judged. Fear of being left. Fear of being called difficult. Fear of finally seeing how little someone would offer if you stopped doing all the emotional labor. But dignity asks for honesty. It asks you to stop decorating pain so it looks acceptable. It asks you to stop calling neglect complicated. It asks you to stop making excuses for the person who keeps making you feel alone in a connection that was supposed to feel mutual. And yes, there may be grief in this. There may be grief in becoming a woman who no longer allows what she once tolerated. There may be grief in realizing how many times you handed your crown to someone who treated it like an ordinary thing. There may be grief in remembering how long you waited for someone to see what should never have required convincing. But grief is not proof that you are going backward. Sometimes grief is the sound of illusion leaving the body. Sometimes grief is the heart making room for truth. Sometimes grief is the old self saying goodbye to the life she tried so hard to make work. Let her grieve. Let her cry. Let her feel the sorrow of what she wanted, what she gave, what she hoped, and what never became safe enough to hold her. But do not let grief persuade you that dignity was a mistake. Missing what hurt you does not mean you should return. Feeling lonely does not mean you chose wrong. Wanting tenderness does not mean you should accept fragments. A memorable line for this part of the journey is this: a woman does not lose her softness when she protects herself. She gives her softness a rightful home, and that home must begin within her own life, her own standards, her own truth, her own peace. Because you are the only one who has to live your own life. You are the one who must inhabit the consequences of ignoring your inner knowing. You are the one who must heal from the promises you accepted without proof. You are the one who must recover from every season where you made yourself smaller just to be kept. So let dignity become ordinary, not something you reach for only when you are wounded. Let it be in how you answer, how you pause, how you leave, how you stay silent when silence protects your peace, how you refuse to audition for love, how you stop presenting your pain as evidence in front of someone who has already shown they do not wish to understand. This is where a woman becomes rooted, not because life becomes easy, not because the past loses all tenderness, but because she finally stops making her worth available for debate. And in the next part, we will move toward the final return, the place where a woman begins living forward, not as someone untouched by pain, but as someone no longer ruled by it. There comes a time when a woman stops asking pain for permission to live again. Not because the wound has vanished, not because every memory has become harmless, not because she has received the apology, the explanation, the closure, or the tenderness she once begged for in silence, but because she begins to understand that her life cannot remain frozen at the place where someone failed to honor her. She may still remember. She may still feel. She may still have moments when an old ache rises without warning. But she is no longer willing to make a home in the wound. That is the quiet return. Not a dramatic rebirth, not a perfect ending, not the sudden becoming of a woman who never hurts anymore. It is simply the sacred moment when she says, I have lost enough of myself to this. And that sentence carries more power than anger ever could, because anger may rise and protect her for a season. Grief may soften what anger cannot reach, but truth is what finally steadies her feet. The truth is that being unchosen by someone did not make her unworthy. Being neglected did not make her invisible. Being betrayed did not make her foolish. Being left without closure did not make her incomplete. She is not the sum of how someone mishandled her. She is not the silence they gave. She is not the promise they broke. She is not the woman they failed to recognize. She is the woman who survived the confusion and is now learning to live without making confusion her identity. That is restoration. A woman living forward does not pretend the past meant nothing. She honors what it taught her. She admits what it cost her. She tells the truth about where she was wounded. But she no longer allows the person who hurt her to remain the center of her becoming, because you are the only one who has to live your own life. You are the one who must decide whether your next season will be built from fear or from truth. You are the one who must choose whether to keep circling the same unanswered questions or begin asking better ones. Not, why wasn't I enough? But, what kind of life do I deserve to inhabit now that I know my worth cannot be negotiated? Not, will they regret losing me? But how do I stop losing myself? Not, did they ever love me? But, did that love allow me to feel safe, respected, and whole? These questions do not erase pain. They mature it. They turn suffering into wisdom without making suffering sacred. Because pain is not proof that love was deep. Sometimes pain is proof that you stayed too long in a place where your spirit had no room to breathe. The practical inner shift now is simple, but not easy. Begin making choices your future self can trust. Choose rest when your body is tired from surviving. Choose silence when explaining would only reopen the wound. Choose distance when closeness requires self-abandonment. Choose peace even when chaos still feels familiar. Choose truth even when longing tries to make the past look softer than it was. And when you are tempted to return to what broke you, do not ask only what you miss. Ask what it cost. Ask what happened to your voice there. Ask what happened to your sleep. Ask what happened to your confidence. Ask what happened to the woman who once believed she did not have to beg for basic care. Let the full truth answer, not the lonely truth, not the romantic truth, not the frightened truth, the full truth. Because healing requires honest memory. A woman cannot free herself from a story she keeps editing to make the pain seem smaller. And once she remembers fully, not to punish herself, but to protect herself, she becomes clearer. She stops romanticizing inconsistency. She stops calling emotional hunger love. She stops confusing longing with destiny. She stops carrying a crown in her hands and finally remembers it was meant to rest on her own head. The memorable line is this: your worth did not begin when someone chose you, and it did not end when someone failed to. Let that become a quiet lamp inside you. On the days when you feel strong, on the days when you feel fragile, on the days when you miss what you know you cannot return to, on the days when silence feels heavy, on the days when you wonder whether your heart will ever trust peace again, let that truth remain. Your worth was never waiting inside their recognition. It was never locked inside their apology. It was never buried inside their return. It was with you when you were overgiving. It was with you when you were waiting. It was with you when you were crying in the dark, wondering why you were not enough. It was with you even when you could not feel it. And now, slowly, you are learning to live as though you believe it. Not perfectly, not every hour, but honestly, you are learning to stop begging for a seat at tables where your soul was never fed. You are learning to stop watering gardens where nothing was planted for you. You are learning to stop standing outside the door of your own life, waiting for someone else to invite you in. You are entering now, gently, with grief, perhaps, with trembling hands, perhaps, but also with dignity, with wisdom, with a deeper respect for the woman who stayed, the woman who hurt, the woman who woke up, and the woman who is still becoming. You do not have to become cold to be free. You do not have to become hard to be safe. You do not have to stop loving deeply. You only have to stop abandoning yourself in the name of love. And from here, your life can become your own again. Not untouched by pain, but no longer ruled by it. Not closed to love, but no longer starving for it. Not waiting to be chosen, but finally living as a woman who understands that her life is sacred because she is the one who must live it. So live it with truth. Live it with tenderness. Live it with standards. Live it with grace. Live it with the quiet authority of a woman who has remembered that she was never less valuable because someone failed to see what was always there.